There are tons of people who hate vegans and even wish us all death. But why is this? You don't see the same for people who eat a paleo diet or a keto diet or even the up-and-coming carnivore diet, and I know people are already racing to the comments to tell me that veganism is more than a diet. Don't worry, I know. That's a vegan's favorite thing to correct people on, so we are all well aware.
Hi everyone. So today, as has been voted for by my patrons, I'll be responding to a video titled Vegans Are the Worst Thing for Veganism. At the time of this recording, the video has 69,000 views. I think the errors made in this video are largely, if not completely, a consequence of a very narrow western-centric worldview. You will soon see what I mean. Anyway, let's begin.
So we are all well aware. But why do vegans get so much more hate than really any other way of eating or social movement? Who's to blame for all this? I think it's us.
So the very premise of this entire video is a false one. The animal rights movement gets more hate than any other social movement is a statement that only holds true if you think that the Western world is all that exists, that entire continents like Asia and Africa don't actually exist. I'll give you specific examples later, so stick around for those. But there are parts of Asia, at least, and probably even of Africa, where participating in certain social movements will not just get people to say that they don't like you. It won't be just people wishing death upon you and commenting on your YouTube video how much they dislike you. No, they will show up on your doorstep and literally kill you, or at least very severely harm you. The original uploader of this video, the channel Anna's Analysis, is based in the United States. The reason that they don't see such hatred for other social movements there is because equality amongst human beings has been largely, but not completely, been achieved there. Most other social movements in the United States are not challenging the status quo. They are the status quo. Even the original uploader of the video knows this and even says this later on in her video. Here's the clip.
People who are racist or murderers are considered to be awful by most people.
So this false premise of her video is because she is sheltered by Western privilege. Note that I'm not saying white privilege. I'm saying Western privilege.
When I went vegan at 14 years old, I was a little bit more pushy than I wish I'd been, and I think a lot of vegans can relate to being like that at first. Some people, though, do not outgrow the militant approach and continue with that kind of activism for much longer.
Remember this line about how much she has supposedly mentally matured since she was 14. I have something to say about this later on in my video.
When I went vegan at 14 years old, I was a little bit more pushy than I wish I'd been, and I think a lot of vegans can relate to being like that at first. Some people, though, do not outgrow the militant approach and continue with that kind of activism for much longer. While that might bring a small number of people into veganism, it pushes so many more away.
What is this based on? There are no sources provided by Anna, that's the name of the original uploader. So basically, Anna is making claims without providing evidence. And she has very cunningly framed this sentence in such a manner that no matter how many vegans you point to who went vegan because of an approach like this, she can always say, oh, but it pushed so many people away. But the thing is that I can play this game too. I too can say that although such an approach might push a small number of people away from veganism, it brings in so many more. But anyway, that's not a claim that I am making. I'm just demonstrating the absurdity and the baselessness of the argument that she is making. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Now you might be thinking there is some validity to this argument that such an approach does push more people away. But the problem is that you just cannot make assumptions like that based on your own psychology, on the basis of the psychology of the people, or the handful of people that you know. Human beings are not a monolith. We don't all think alike. We don't all react alike. you might not react well to a straightforward, direct approach like this, and that's okay, right? But there will be people who will react better to such an approach. Indeed, there are people who went vegan just because of an approach like this. It gave them that kick. Some people react really well to the kind of style that Earthling Ed has. Others react much better to the style that Joey Carbstrong has. So we need both of those styles. We need both of those people in our movement. Like, consider two people. Someone who is all about facts and logic, and someone who is all about love and kindness. If you make the same argument to both of these people, they will not react in the same way. The same argument that convinces one of these people to go vegan might not convince the other to go vegan. You will probably need different kinds of activism to convince different kinds of people. And therefore, within the movement, we need different kinds of styles of activism to convince all the different kinds of people that exist on the planet.
If we were more considerate and mindful with the things we read online, people might not think we're so detestable.
When I was at age 14, I had this obsessive desire to be liked by others. So much so that I would censor myself. I would not actually say the things that I believe. And I think that most people can relate to being like this at age 14. Some people, though, they never grow this over-obsession with being liked by others. And then they grow up and make YouTube videos why everyone else should also be overly obsessed with being liked by others. Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying this video, a sub to the channel and a like on this video would be mature. Anyway, let's move on.
One statement vegans like to use to explain why we get hate is, people just want to hear good things about their bad habits. That's definitely true, but not every movement that doesn't tell people good things about their bad habits gets the same kind of hate as veganism does. Take the sustainable fashion movement, for instance. You don't see people talking about how much they hate people that shop at the Salvation Army instead of H&M. They don't get hate for speaking negatively against fast fashion because they're not self-righteous. Even though talking negatively about fast fashion might make people who buy clothes from fast fashion brands feel guilty about their choices.
That is a bad analogy. And let me explain why. You see, people already care about the victims of the fast fashion industry. They don't care as much as they should about the victims of the animal agriculture industry. People already care about human children, and thus want to avoid anything that causes and contributes to child labor. People don't care, even though they should, about non-human animals. People who ask you to shop sustainably are only telling you how you should shop in order to have the best possible effect on the individuals that you already care about. Vegans, on the other hand, are explaining to non-vegans why they ought to care about individuals that they don't already care about. This is a massive and extremely morally relevant distinction between these two examples. Thankfully, though, we do have examples of what happens when advocates and activists try to explain to people why they ought to care about and not harm individuals whom they don't already care about. For this, we will have to move beyond a sort of narrow western-centric worldview and look at what's happening in the rest of the world. Atheist activists in countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh are killed for their atheist activism, or as the religious fundamentalists would put it, they're killed for blasphemy. They don't just have people wishing that upon them or creating subreddits and Facebook groups. No, people show up to their doorsteps and kill them. Journalists in India are killed. They are shot to death for writing against a right-wing government. Women's rights activists in Iran receive death threats and are actually killed by patriarchal morons. They are arrested by their own government and sentenced to decades in prison for protesting, amongst other things, the compulsory hijab. I could go on for hours here, But you get the point. Now, the response to this should not be, oh, how dare you compare all of those to the animal rights movement. That shouldn't be the response. The original uploader of this video, that's Anna's analysis, made the false point, that no other social movement receives the kind of hate that the animal rights movement receives. I'm just demonstrating that that is a false statement, that it is mostly, if not entirely, a consequence of a very, very narrow western-centric worldview. Now, will she victim blame all of these people for being killed? Because, according to her, people don't dislike other people for trying to do good in the world.
People don't dislike people for trying to do good in the world. People dislike people who are arrogant about the good they're trying to do in the world.
Maybe she will victim blame all of these people. Who knows? But the bottom line is this. The statement, people don't dislike people for trying to do good in the world, is hyper-privileged, western-centric nonsense.
We also don't help ourselves out when we discourage reducitarianism. Many people do not want to and will not go vegan. The vegan movement would largely benefit from us encouraging people to consume less animal products. We can all live in a fantasy world where we believe that everyone will go vegan if they're just educated enough, but that's not the reality we live in.
Now this is known as the soft bigotry of low expectations. Sometimes the soft bigotry of low expectations can be a form of racism, as it is later on in her video, but not on this occasion. Here it's just more general. I'll say this again, this is not racism. The uploader of this video is vegan, so she understands why we ought to be vegan. But she thinks so lowly of others that she thinks that even if they're well educated on the subject, they just won't go vegan. She thinks that she is capable of reaching the moral standard, of this very basic moral standard, that we ought not to harm non-human animals for our temporary taste pleasure. But not other people. How can they reach the moral standard that she is capable of? The thing about a lot of vegan advocates is that we respect people way too much to treat them like children. We will tell them how it really is. We refuse to insult their intelligence by talking to them as if they are children who just cannot process logical arguments.
We turn away so many people by making them think that going vegan is the only way. We say things like, well, is it okay to murder a human 6 days a week if you don't on the 7th day? And while from the perspective of some vegans, killing a non-human animal might be just as bad as killing a human, we have to act with public opinion in mind. We can compare factory farming to the Holocaust and slavery all we want, but if we don't understand how insulting and offensive that is to people and cultures who've actually been affected by those things, we again come off as so ignorant.
Okay, this is an example of what is known as the white savior complex. She has declared herself as the one who saves marginalized groups and decides for them, for us, what is and isn't offensive and insulting to us. Another implication of what she just said is that she views such marginalized groups as monoliths incapable of independent thought, who all view the same thing as insulting and offensive. But even if I were to excuse this truly nauseating white savior complex, she is, intentionally or unintentionally, advocating for repeating the traumatic experiences of Indians. Let me explain. You see, Indians were enslaved and endured a Holocaust. But this enslavement and this Holocaust was never referred to using those terms. So most people outside India are simply not aware that these things went on in India under the British Empire. She is repeating the trauma by saying that these words, enslavement and Holocaust, cannot be used to describe the very real experiences of sentient individuals so as to not offend some other group, what she thinks will offend some other group. This is exactly what was done to Indians when the experience of Indians was simply not allowed to be referred to as a Holocaust or enslavement so as to not offend other groups. I think this in itself is completely morally repugnant to not accurately describe the very real experiences of a certain group, to just not offend some other group. But even if we were to just look at it from a practical perspective, Indians are 1.3 billion people, and Anna here, in her white savior complex, is actively advocating, probably unintentionally, for repeating the trauma of 1.3 billion people. Also, I would like to draw your attention to how she talks of marginalized groups as a separate group than vegans, whom she continuously refers to as us. Now, this is probably a subconscious belief rather than a conscious one, and I do think that that is extremely morally relevant. But the implication of what she just said is that she thinks of marginalized groups as incapable of reaching the moral standard that she is capable of reaching, she, a white person. This is racism with a cuddle. By the way, this is Gauri. He is a Jewish man, so he belongs to a culture that was affected by the Holocaust. And in this footage that Anna's Analysis, the original uploader, is showing us, Gary Yurovsky was comparing the Holocaust to the animal Holocaust. But her commentary is that if we don't understand how insulting and offensive it is to peoples and cultures who were affected by it, we come off as ignorant. But that is someone who belongs to a culture who was affected by it. So the mantra seems to be, listen to marginalized groups, but only as long as they agree with me.
Contrarily, those who focus on sharing information about vegan health or recipes or talk about veganism casually and non-forcefully on social media or in real life are so much more likely to leave a positive impression on people who watch or interact with them.
And all of those things are important. They talk about how to go vegan. But if that's the only thing that they listen to, they'll get the wrong idea about what veganism is. Veganism is not a diet. It's not a lifestyle. It's a commitment to justice. It's not good enough to simply know how to get beyond this. We also have to know why we ought to get beyond this. And that is indeed what a lot of vegans and vegan advocates are trying to explain. And that is just as important, if not more important, than learning how to go vegan.
When talking about veganism, we should try our best to speak in a logical way, not an emotional one.
I agree. When we speak about veganism or anything at all really, we have to try to be as logical as possible and get over this over-obsession of being liked by others. We have to treat the person in front of us as an adult with complete moral agency instead of treating them like emotionally unstable children who will throw tantrums if we just say the right thing, but not in just the right way. Anyway, this is where you should click if you'd like to have early access to my videos for just $1 a month. I have been Aditya Prakash or Soytheist. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave a comment letting me know what your thoughts are, and we can have some logical discussions in there, like adults.